I think it's something which is really very, very powerful and enabling.
So API is definitely leading.
The key to the cloud element of this is the single source of truth.
But with APIs comes the question, are we talking the same language?
Hi and welcome. Craig Wilson and Ray Thompson here with the latest episode of Making the Media. Thanks a lot for joining us once again. And today we've not one, not two, but three great guests for you to enjoy. So Ray, tell us all about who we have on today.
Absolutely. Thanks, Craig. Yes, today's episode, we're going to focus on an organization called MovieLabs, which is a body that Avid does quite a bit of work with. Our guests are Jim Helman, who is their CTO, and Mark Turner, who is their program director of production technology. And from Avid, we have Shailendra Mithur, who is our VP of architecture. Now, if you don't know much about MovieLabs, that's okay, because we're going to start the episode with Jim, who's going to talk about exactly what MovieLabs is and what their mission is.
MovieLabs was founded almost 20 years ago because the technology executives at the then 6 major Hollywood studios, so Disney, Fox, Warner, Universal, Sony, and Paramount, saw the big challenges and opportunities that technology was presenting with its rapid changes. And they saw benefits in collaborating on areas that weren't competitive, right? There's a tremendous amount of technology that is, underpinning everything. It's not areas that the studios compete on. So they decided to start MovieLabs as a technology joint venture. Our board consists mostly of studio chief technology officers, or their equivalent. And our charter is really to help develop and advance a common agenda on technology and interoperability. And we do that through thought leadership, best practices, detailed specifications. Our initial focus was on distribution technology and content protection, supply chain. We developed a number of specifications to automate the distribution supply chain between studios and streaming services. And also built a unique identifier system for film and TV content, kind of the ISBN numbering system for film and TV content called the Entertainment Identifier Registry. So that was our work for most of the first decade of the company. But about 6 years ago, our board said that they wanted us to shift our focus. We've done such a great job with distribution technology that they said, hey, come over and help out on production technology, which is also undergoing rapid changes. There are opportunities with the cloud and other things. And so that led to the 2030 vision for media creation.
And the first thing we did was sort of gather all the studio production executives together and really find out from them, what were they working on, what was cutting edge, what was working, what wasn't working. And we put all that together in a publication that came out in 2019 at IBC, which is called the 2030 Vision, which gave us 10 and a half years at that point to go deliver on the vision. And it's really focused on not where do we think things will be, but where do we want things to be? Jim mentioned a cloud foundation, so we started with that. Everything sort of assumes that media is stored once and put in the cloud, and we're trying to avoid the current workflow challenges where people duplicate content, send it to people, send a metadata sidecar file and an email and a phone call and a follow-up, and then it's duplicated and different versions are created and sent around the place. That is slow and inefficient. So we wanted to get rid of all that. So we put everything in the cloud and it stays there, is some of the initial assumptions. And then we started building on top of that. So how do you work on security when it's all in there? Then how do you work on identity? And then we layered on software-defined workflows, which is, okay, now you've got that foundation. How do you do a better job of actually moving everybody off of these sort of legacy, rigid, inflexible workflows and into something that is much more akin to the IT industry, where people can drop in a new application, hit a few APIs, and start using an application very quickly, as opposed to what we would do, where people would say, don't touch anything. Like, the workflow works, so don't try anything new right now, which is kind of crazy and slows us up. So the 2030 vision is all about bringing efficiency back into storytelling and allowing the creatives to focus more on being creative and less on entering metadata, sending files, capturing files, changing the naming of files, like all the stuff that is not actually productive and takes days, weeks, hours out of everybody's production schedules.
The document itself was done in 2019, but it's a living, breathing thing. It's developed and moved and looked at other areas. For example, things like security, metadata, ontologies, other things like that as well. So talk a little bit about that, Mark, and maybe Shailendra, you could talk a little bit about some of the work that Avid's done in that area. But Mark, for you first.
Yeah, sure. I mean, you're right. It's a living document, and obviously it's moved beyond the studios now. It's sort of been embraced by various different companies as kind of their vision. But it's really non-specific, right? It's a roadmap. It says we should all try and shoot for this, and we'll all be better if we get that together. So yeah, we've done deeper dives on what do we mean by a software-defined workflow? What do we mean by security? How should you build security in that sort of system? We've built a whole architecture for that. We're working on data interoperability right now, which is where this ontology comes from, which is really a common language for humans and applications to be able to talk to each other. And we're not just sort of practicing and putting out white papers and sort of shouting from the mountaintop. We're actually doing this work as well. So we have a program called 2030 Greenlight, where we actually go out and build some of this stuff in a lab with real workflows and real tools and real applications and real creative teams and try it and see what works. And if it works, we put out what worked, and here's some examples and some references. And if it doesn't work, well, we're interested in that as well. Why didn't it work? What can we do to improve things? So we're busy building stuff. We put together this industry forum of various companies who are also aligned with building things and actually want to make the reality so people can go and buy it in products and services. And we also go and take best practices from what's working in the real world. So we've written out a whole selection of showcase documents now, which are case studies based on people who are implementing the 2030 vision today. Like what worked, what benefits did they see, how's it going to work for other people? And we've got examples in live broadcast, local news, the Royal Ballet in London. Like there are many different use cases for the 2030 vision. It's really about any collaborative media being made. So yeah, we're busy out doing some references, and Avid's been a great partner in doing some of those showcases and examples.
Yeah. And also on the ontology for media creation is worth spending a little bit of time on, because it's an area where there are so many metadata systems out there. Why do you need one more? And we really saw a big gap. Most of the metadata systems that are out there are specific to a particular part of the workflow or a particular problem. There really wasn't a model that could tie everything together, all the way from concept and script through onset and post-production and finally into mastering and distribution. And with the advent of AI and really wanting to capitalize on metadata and the connection, having a knowledge graph that really ties everything together and enables teams to find the assets that they're looking for and know the context in which something was created or where it fits into the script and the narrative, tremendously important. And there really wasn't a system that could do that. So I think it's something which is really very, very powerful and enabling to all of these workflows, whether it's software-defined workflows or having AI help curate and track your metadata. And I know that's something that you guys are also, I think, very focused on.
I mean, to us, MovieLabs represents they're a voice of our post customers. But I think you covered, and Mark also mentioned broadcast at one point, but because there are some reflections of a lot of what's happening in the theatrical post industry, in the broadcast industry as well. So it's been extremely valuable to follow not just the vision statement from those customers through MovieLabs, but also just the other initiatives that you guys talked about. And it's coming across very clearly. That customers want automation, they want interop, security, cloud usage. So for us, it was also making sure that we're not just following what they're doing, but finding ways to, and also giving feedback to some of the MovieLabs initiatives and through them to some of the customers on exactly what's going on. I think one thing I want to just call out is, especially on the, I mentioned automation and interop, Avid's been on an API first track for the last little while. There were the traditional methods, especially on the post side, have been so much about file exchanges and just passing around these files and decisions, creative decisions. But I'll call them manual, but I mean, it has been sort of hand carried in many ways. So again, that's where the automation interop APIs really come in over there. And whether it's Media Composer based panels, Pro Tools scripting SDK, we're developing out, we announced Avid Content Core at IBC. That's an API first method technology as well. So API is definitely leading. But with APIs comes the question of, are we talking the same language? Are we able to express the same things? So Jim mentioned some of the OMC work. So the problem statement is, how do we make sure that we have the same vocabulary? And even if we have our own vocabulary, for example, we have to cater to broadcast and news and music, and eventually we have to serve multiple folks. Underneath it all, do they mean the same thing? That's really the problem that we're also eager to solve here, working with the MovieLabs folks. And just to give you an example, a Media Composer bin is a collection of asset. But if you go to Wolf Tech News, a board is a collection of asset. Two different things. But guess what? The MovieLabs ontology would call it a collection underneath. So we know they are a collection underneath. They mean the same thing. So that's one of the examples of the harmonization of the vocabulary and what we actually map to, just so that it serves interop and API needs.
There's a language that's developed in the last 100 years in the creative industry, and we could call it the HPI, the Human Programming Interface, which is, between a director and a creative team. They have a way of expressing, this is what I want, this is how I want the shot to look, this is how it should track across there's been a vocab, as Shailendra says. We have to turn that from an HPI into an API so that the machines can also understand what the hell we're talking about, right? When we say shot, do we mean someone was shot in the scene, or do we mean it was a shot that was a capture? There's takes, and take has a different usage in English, and so we have to teach the machines what do we mean by all this stuff, which is one of the reasons why we have this standard ontology. And as Shailendra says, it's really hard to build that for the entire industry at one go. So we're breaking it off into different chunks, and we've been adding like visual effects this year. We're working on the entire video pipeline from capture all the way through post, and we're breaking off different bits of the vocab to expand it as we go.
We also really love the API first approach. I mean, if you look at our work on interoperability, one of the key tenets is the interoperability of things in a software-defined workflow. And if you don't have those API surfaces, you can't integrate it into those automated, scalable workflows. So we love that approach, Shailendra.
That's great. So sort of I guess somewhat of a second part to that question. I know we've just touched on some of it, but can you comment on the impact that Avid's involvement has had on MovieLabs? And maybe Shailendra, you can take this one first, and then maybe Jim and Mark.
We've been learning from not just the project greenlight type of projects, and but also from some of the customers, what they've been talking about, and bringing in that input within Avid as well. And our impact, I'm hoping, is that we were able to give a lot of feedback. I think one of the earliest feedback was definition of cloud, especially when we're talking about hybrid workflows. And that's where a lot of our customers were also reflecting that we want to have data sovereignty. But yet there's a centralization that helps with collaboration. So accommodating that. So this is some of the feedback that we brought in around what is the definition. And we didn't just talk about and provide feedback. We showed it, right? We showed models, and some of the Mark mentioned some of the showcases, right? So there were showcases that actually talk about some of the asset management workflows from some of the studios, and others that were talking about editorial. More recently, we've been showing things like storage and how that actually works, and some of the remote storage approaches that allow some of the hybrid workflows to. So hopefully we've been able to sculpt some of the thinking as we go along, as well as receive it. I think from the involvement, Avid's involvement overall, right now we're very much focused on some of the Project Greenlight work as well. And there's been motivation there. Again, going back to that whole interoperability, and I'll kind of bring up this whole idea of the broken metadata telephone. Right, the broken metadata telephone is literally when you have a pipeline of applications that are promising to each other. You gave me something. I'm gonna carry, even though I'm gonna do something creative. I promise I'll pass it along to somebody else. Fundamentally, that's problematic, right? Because not every application can keep every single thing. So that famous line, Avid dropped the metadata. Oh my goodness, how long have we heard that? And we analyze it and say, oh, what? That's not us. Nobody gave it to us. Or that you use a different file format which cannot contain all the metadata. So this is where some of the concepts around Project Greenlight also come in, which is, well, you solve some of that by basically either two ways. One is centralize the metadata so you can fetch it in one place. Well, guess what? We do that with our asset management system. But even better, taking data sovereignty into account, what if we could even just say, hey, this is where the information is, go get it directly, right? So that you can respect data sovereignty. And by the way, this is part of the feedback we brought into the MovieLabs, that's maybe another way of looking at it, which is it's not just about everything in one place that you can centralize, but a bit of a mesh architecture that could actually work here, where you can respect the data sovereignty, the role-based access control, or even attribute-based access control to elements. So these are feedback items we've given, but also we're benefiting from a lot of the MovieLabs work for our own, to sculpt our way forward.
Yeah, and thank you for bringing up cloud, because that is something that you know is extremely important, that people understand that hybrid is a key foundation and part of the 2030 vision. It's always 2030 vision definition of cloud has always included public, private, hybrid, on-prem, because the benefits of the 2030 vision really come from people being able to work together from wherever they are, because the tools and services that they need are running on connected and remotely accessible infrastructure. So when we talk about cloud, we prefer to talk about it in terms of we call connected collaborative infrastructure, because it's really the connectivity and the collaboration that it enables that matters, and that makes all this software defined workflows and the benefits for creative teams. That's really where it's all coming from. And I think it's great to see systems like Content Core come along that can also help you track all of your assets, wherever they are across that entire mesh of different infrastructures.
And there's another point that Shailendra said that I want to pick up on, which is actually the key to the cloud element of this is the single source of truth, right? So there's not multiple different versions of a file floating around with different metadata attachments to it, and people going, well, which one's the latest one, right? If we all centralize stuff and we put it in a connected storage location or locations, because ultimately you could have multiple clouds even on a single production, and that's fine with the vision. But we were able to go, that's the latest EDL, that's the latest proxy of that, and then relate them all together. So it is very clear to say, well, I know what day we were shooting, but what lens were we using on that day? And where's the proxy file that goes with this raw file? And we can relate them all together. And Shailendra picked up on some of the other excellent points that Avid have helped contribute. And Avid is one of our industry forum leadership companies, so one of the most involved. But you guys are in the middle of these workflows, so you've got access to the people who are having real problems today, and we can see how we can go and solve them. And because, especially with Media Composer and the MAM products, Avid's like right in the middle, right in editorial, where a lot of these problems all either emanate or they all culminate. So it's great to get the insight of companies like Avid and go, okay, so what can we fix, and in what order? Like, we can't fix everything in the industry, so what can we break down now and fix? And Content Core is a great example of there's a distinct need there around centralizing the assets and the metadata and being able to point to with an API and say, okay, where is that data? And Content Core just steps in and does that. So we love that, and using the ontology to actually communicate into other parts of the ecosystem from Content Core is actually critical for everybody else in the rest of the ecosystem to say, hey, Avid, can you give me the latest on this? What is this file? What does it mean? Where did it come from? So it's a great two-way street, as Shailendra said.
We've talked a little bit about 2030 Greenlight. And I think one of the things that we're keen to talk about is that this has already manifested itself in some real world examples. So I think it's probably worthwhile just spending a little bit of time of talking about, some of the real world workflows that, for example, you showcased at IBC, last year as well. So maybe talk a little bit about some of the work that's already been done and get into a little bit of detail on that.
Yeah. So 2030 Greenlight, as I said, is a project where we do stuff, right? With partners, we break down a workflow, and we've used real content from real productions with real creative teams, and we have real problems that they had when they were shooting the show, and we're breaking them down and going, okay, how could you apply the 2030 vision and improve things? And we've been doing that with Avid. So the first one was actually around getting content out of script and into one of these knowledge graphs that Jim talked about, right? Everything from the script. So the lines of dialogue, who are the characters that were saying it, where was it meant to be shot? Where's the narrative location? And then we've been augmenting that data as you go through a production to go, okay, now we've moved into pre-production and planning, and then ultimately into physical production, and we're shooting stuff. Now we can add to that knowledge graph. Now we know we have a production location, which is different to the narrative location, right? We have actors that are portraying characters. We want to put that stuff in. There was the line of dialogue that was in the script, and there was a line of dialogue that was actually said on camera. And then there's all the shots and takes and the media that comes with all of that, the audio files, the attachments, the raws, the proxies. So we're ingesting all of that information into this knowledge graph and then working with companies like Avid and saying, okay, so now what can we do with that? Well, we can do some great AI work to be able to have chatbots who can help you navigate production. But we can also do what we call intelligent automation, which is pushing things through a production automatically. So some of the examples we were showing at IBC, and we're going to be doing more of this at the HPA Tech Retreat that's coming up. I want to trigger events in a workflow. So we had a reshoot request, right? There was a shot that didn't look right when they got to final edit, and they're like, we're going to have to reshoot that. Okay, well, in the old world, that causes a huge amount of logistical challenges, right? Everybody has to go back and find out, well, what shot you're talking about. Oh, that was the one we shot on that stage that back then. Okay, well, what do we use for the cameras, the lenses? What do we use for the props? What we have to recreate everything, right? What was the background scene? And put it all back together again and reshoot a scene and then drop it into the cut. And that takes weeks. So we did a bunch of automation work to be able to go, okay, I just want to hit a button. I want to hit a button in Media Composer that says, this is a shot that I want reshot. And trigger all the department heads to get a message that says everything they might need in one message, right? Comes up on Slack, comes up on Teams, could be an email that says, okay, this is the shot the director wants to reshoot. Here's all the information you might need about it. When was it shot originally? What date did we use? What vendors did we use? How much did we spend on it? How much do you want to put in as a new budget? So the humans are still making the decisions. Humans are still making recommendations, but we're using a combination of AI and this intelligent automation, or IA, to be able to put together all the data that human will need to make a decision, like right now. So we're moving what used to take days to organize into real time. Someone can make a decision and go, okay, we're moving forward. And that is actually an enormous amount of data. You got to really understand the workflows. You got to understand who's doing what to be able to go, okay, so how can we make it better? And that's an example of what we're doing in 2030 Greenlight. We're picking off different parts of the workflow. We're now working this year, 2026, into post and the camera thing. And this is going to align with the new release of the OMC version 3.0 later this year, which is like, okay, let's start looking at really detailed camera workflows. And how can we change things all the way down late in post? And we want to keep a cut aligned between the visual effects vendors and the sound vendors and the trailer marketing team, and everything's going through editorial right now, and they've just made a change. And how can we avoid that all hell breaks loose when we've got different versions of the cut running around in the production? So it's examples like that, and Avid obviously is a central part of that, and we love the fact that you're getting a value out of it, and so are we, and so are the productions we're helping.
Initially, so Mark mentioned that we initially engaged with the knowledge graph areas. A lot of that was basically POC work, proof of concepts. What can we do with all this information when we provide it to the editors? So we had multiple conversations with a lot of editors. What would you do? And yeah, a lot of the time they have to print out material, they have to sit next to it to gain all that information just to make editorial decision. And now suddenly it was at the fingertip because there's a lot of the knowledge graph and the relationships, everything that were being kept. Uh, it was at their fingertips. So the first proof of concept that we did was actually just to apply a certain AI tactics, just to make it easy for the editors to understand and locate shots. So the two things came out of it, even for us. Our learning was, first of all, this is not just about assets, it's about knowledge, right? Knowledge graph is just a representative, but it is about providing editors, creatives, access to the knowledge to guide their decision. And this is knowledge about decisions, knowledge about assets. It's much, much richer world out there. So, and we still hope to continue expanding. The second thing that we learned, again, along that whole API first, what the APIs that we used, allowed us to kind of show some automation that, look, we can create some bins automatically. But that was a learning exercise. Now we have the panel SDK, right, and Media Composer. And I know right now I talked about other APIs coming, but with that work, a lot of focus went on bin creation and how to interact with editorial. So the panel SDK became really important, and to the point that actually we don't have to do a lot of that work. The panel SDK, our teams are focused on providing APIs. Right into the bins, into now the timeline, so that decisions can be made. And there are other folks, the partners from the Alliance team that we're bringing in, who are literally developing a lot of these hooks, again, using OMC. So these learnings have really helped us as well. It's not just talking about it, it's actually showing what's possible and now getting it productized in these forms. So it's been very, very helpful, some of the work that's going on with Project Greenlight.
Yeah, Jim, I wanted to pick up on something that Mark said there, that a lot of, I think when the 2030 vision was maybe published, people saw it as perhaps a Hollywood thing. It was a thing about film production, big productions. But I know from chatting to you guys before that you see the application of it actually applying to many different parts of the industry. So I wonder if you talk a little bit about how that perhaps perception has changed a little bit, that this is actually something that can benefit the wider industry.
Yes. So, I mean, MovieLabs, I mean, kind of our name, we are probably primarily focused on, scripted film and television. But the benefits of the things I talked about in terms of using connective, collaborative infrastructures and being able to leverage teams wherever they are and to automate things so that you're not waiting for, some manual process. It applies to a very wide range of tasks and workflows. For the we have a showcase program where we highlight different applications of the 2030 vision principles in real workflows, in real productions. And we had some productions come from an unusual place, from the Royal Opera House. Leveraged the 2030 vision principles and documented a showcase on how they were applying it to their very different type of production work. And broadcast, I think, is also another area. Shalindra mentioned it. Obviously, it's an important market for you guys. And I think in broadcast, because so much of it is real time and live, they've actually had to embrace automation and other things much earlier and more deeply and widely than kind of the scripted film and TV world, because if you're working on a live broadcast, I mean, the live stuff has to be live with minimal delay, and if you're behind the scenes, doing a quick edit because I need to do a quick recap of this thing, it has to be done quickly, and if something is slowing you down, you need to fix that so that you can turn around things quickly. So yes, I mean the 2030 vision, applies very broadly to a wide range of productions and workflows. And I think Shalindra also mentioned, some other areas like news and sports. There are opportunities there for connected ontologies that can kind of plug into that same knowledge graph that we're building with the ontology for media creation. And so we're very interested in engaging with adjacent areas of production to try and make some of those connections.
Yeah, so time is marching on. As with all these things, we have a finite amount of time to have a chat. So maybe to have a sort of final kind of comment from each of you. We've talked a little bit about Avid Content Core and how it's embracing, the 2030 vision and moving things forward. So I wonder if it's worthwhile talking just a little bit about just overall, what you think that maybe means for the industry and really for the whole production community. So Shalindra, maybe you want to talk a little bit about that first, and then Mark and Jim, you can perhaps summarize things from your perspective. But Shalindra, what's your view?
So Avid Content Core is first and fundamentally a SaaS platform. Why is that important? It's not just about the 2030 vision of cloud, because SaaS implies cloud, but it also allows us to just iterate. It allows us to bring out what's needed for the customers to gather feedback and sculpt it further as we go along. That's one of the big impact that I see Content Core having in the industry. So it's not as sorry, this is what you've developed, that's all you have. There is a SaaS and cloud actually means that you can actually have continuous integration and you can bring out those type of practices. So that's one aspect of it. But from a functionality point of view, again, embracing a lot of the MovieLabs vision concepts, we are again encapsulating some of them in terms of things like bring the processing close to the data. Well, we talked about the fact that there's data sovereignty. That means data might actually be, whether that's content, and even if we talk about content, it may be actually in a hybrid way of access on an on-premises location or remote location. And it's actually connected. So that's where some of the processing may happen, but the knowledge is centralized. So again, this hybrid concept comes out. Cloud has a play, and we believe this is all very much aligned with the 2030 vision. The security comes in as soon as we talk about hybrid. We talk about role-based access control in a lot of the MovieLabs conversation. We're talking about access-based control, attribute-based control. These are all concepts that we get to apply, right? And just to make sure we have security mechanism in place, which is not just about network security, but it's actually about access control to the assets. And then some of the AI bits that we're talking about. I love that whole idea of IA and AI, right? AI has its place, right? And intelligent automation is something we've been doing for a very long time. I think Mark and Jim pointed out that in the broadcast world, especially, we've not just the MAM system, a lot of our production management system, automation is key for speed. On the post side, creativity takes a lot of time, but somewhere we need to bring the two together. So there's going to be a blend of AI and APIs, all helping automation. So some of how we actually find content, I mentioned knowledge management. A lot of it is about discovery. Where is the content now being assisted? Because that's not getting in the way of creativity. It's helping the creatives understand what's going on. And then there's automation of like, okay, once you discover it, what do you want to do? That's under the control of the creative and spinning of certain jobs to do intelligent automation. This is all very much aligned with the MovieLabs vision.
Yeah, so I think the role that Content Core plays here is a crucial one in that, because you have all of these assets and they may be spread across many different infrastructures, and having a common place where those assets can be tracked, where there's metadata that will enable you to find and look up things connected to a knowledge graph, tremendously powerful. We're big advocates in the 2030 vision of getting away from referencing files and assets by a fixed file path in some file system. Getting to a point where you're referencing things by identifiers, which you can then look up and find out where are there copies of that, where's there a copy that's closest to me potentially, is tremendously powerful in, I think, enabling the automation that can help set up and provision an artist session without a lot of manual work, or having to reprocess files through some file naming renaming tool. So big advocates of having systems that are able to track many different assets across different infrastructures and keep track of the metadata for them. So kudos for that.
I'll pick up on two things that Shailendra said. One is about Content Core being SaaS, which I think the other bit that people forget about, the benefit with SaaS is you can iterate so much faster. And it's this picking up this speed of innovation, which I think is, I mentioned it earlier, critical, I think, as we go forward. And the benefit with SaaS is everybody's on the same version, and you can just turn up new features and be constantly adding stuff, which I think is great for our industry. We need to get away from legacy versions that people are locked into because they had a certain plugin and they don't want to touch anything because that was the version that it was running in. So that opens innovation for everyone as well. And then the second one about security, I'll just say one more thing about security, because it's hard to make security disappear. But that's our objective, right? You should be able to log in, and the assets that you need and the metadata you need to do the task you're assigned should just automatically happen in the background. And that's actually really hard, and it requires a whole bunch of the industry to get together and figure out how to do that better. So that is one of the things that, having a platform like Content Core right in the middle of editorial is a good place to start working on spreading that security message out from there. And then the last thing I'll say is I'll say thank you to Avid for taking that leadership, for being able to go, what should we do differently to be able to embrace this vision, and then go actually invest in that and release products and get stuff to market that is delivering on the vision.
It's great to hear the progress that's being made on delivering on the vision and how it is applicable to the many different parts of the industry, not just scripted film and television.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, we've got a couple of QR codes to share with you this time. First of all, to find out more about Avid Content Core, that we spoke about quite a lot, then scan the code that's on the screen now. And don't forget, you can also check out the recent podcast episode we did with Avid CTO Tom Sharma, where he talked in depth about our work there. And if you want to know more about MovieLabs, then scan the QR code you can see now. Of course, if you're listening to the podcast rather than watching, then just check out the show notes and you can get all the links from there. So Ray, who's up next for us on the show?
Thanks, Craig. Next time around, we are speaking with Brian Cayley from Streamwell, who is another partner who has developed a very cool solution for Media Composer using Panel SDK, which enables review and approval. And he's going to talk us through exactly what that does and how it enables efficiencies.
In a way, like, the NLE is the office now.
Whereas in the past, you had to rely on people typically arriving in person.
Yeah, it lets someone like a producer check in on the progress of work without interrupting the work. We always talk about the verticals.
Excellent stuff. Yes, we've got everything from jazz to live streaming to come in that one. So why not subscribe on your platform of choice and get notified when the episode is out? That's all for us for now. So on behalf of Ray and me, thanks a lot for watching or listening. We really do appreciate it. Thanks, of course, to our production team, and we hope to see you all next time for more people making the media.